Hello and welcome to the Westcity Church podcast. If you'd like to get to know us more, find us at westcitychurch.com.au. We really hope that you're encouraged by today's message.
So I was trying to think of what to talk about this morning, and I worked really hard in my head to try and think of a way that I could talk about my baby, because let's be real, she's my biggest draw card right now. So I'm like, maybe I talk about the food because she's eating solids. Yeah, she's talking too. Maybe I talk about the unconditional love thing. Anyway, maybe I talk about the fact that she just won't shut up. I actually couldn't think of anything. This hasn't got anything to do with my talk. I just wanted you to talk through my process. I'm not going to talk about my baby at all. I'm actually going to talk about, sorry to ruin your life, football, AFL specifically, so something else very precious to me. So I'm a big footy fan. I really like Freo Dockers. Yeah, let's go, represent. And I try and get to as many games as I can. And something that I really, really love about going to the footy is the community. Oh, Bubs. I really like you get on this bus with a whole bunch of rando strangers, people you've never met before, people you're probably never going to talk to again, or probably wouldn't talk to if you weren't on the same bus. And you just have the greatest chats. And you get to this stadium of 30,000 people and just a moment. I promise this isn't a bit. So you get to this stadium and there's 30,000 people there, and you're all kind of united in this common purpose. It's so cool, right? You don't have to be good at footy. You don't even have to play footy. You don't have to say all the right things or do all the right things. To be honest, you don't really even have to know all the rules. You're just there, yeah? And it's just this cool sense of being connected and being a part of this community. And to me, that's like a little snapshot of the kingdom, right? There's this place where it's a fellowship of difference. We have all these people come from all these different situations. You don't have to say all the right things or do all the right things. You don't even have to know all the rules. You can come and be a part of this community, and we can all be striving for this common purpose. And the table is just the embodiment of that, really, is that all of us from all these different walks of life can come to this space freely, and we can be welcomed there. It's the magic of the table, right? A bunch of you guys, we probably have completely different views. We probably have completely different ways we live our lives, but we are together as a community. And I do just want to bring it back around to the start, so please enjoy. My baby in a football jersey. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you, everyone. I kind of didn't want that to end. It felt just so sacred, and I've got a bit of the shakes. Just felt so special to be reminded in and of ourselves, I think, about the depth and the breadth and the height and the volume of God's love. But then that we get to declare that in this building, but in and over each other. What a privilege. I am really blessed today to bring a message about the use of oceans and seas in the Bible. And as you know, we've been doing a series about the landscapes of the Bible and what are the terrain markers that have been used either as metaphorical or literary devices across the Bible that give us pointers and markers of who God is and his presence and his power and his character. And for obvious reasons, we're having a slightly longer service today, and so I'm trying to make this message a bit shorter. So I'm asking for your permission and forgiveness that we're going to dive really deep really quickly. And there's a lot that are obviously, you can't do justice to these anyway in 20 to 30 minutes, these topics. And as Lauren mentioned, I was saying to her, I was a little bit stressed that I couldn't give the meat of it. She's like, this is a trailer. This is the movie trailer that seeds information and ideas for people to take home and look at in our Bibles when we read it. And hopefully when there's reference to things, we'll have a bit of a ding. So this is the movie trailer about seas, about oceans. We have had such poetic and meaningful introductions to 4 of the landscapes, and we have one more to go next week. We've had mountains, the idea of where heaven meets earth, the tree of life, God's gift of eternal life. We've had the wilderness, places of testing and trust, or as Lauren described, the wilderness table. And then last week we had Tara bring to us the river of life with the idea about God's abundance and renewal. And this week we're going to go into the great unknown of the ocean. I am really conscious of the idea of what oceans brings up for different people, that for some of us, when we think about the sea or when we think about the ocean, we are met with a sense of calm, with a sense of freedom, that being in the water of the ocean is like nothing on earth and there's no place that you'd rather be. And for other people, there might be memories or experiences of sea or oceans or water that are really unsafe and unhelpful. And so I want to honour that there is a depth and breadth and diversity of those experiences for each of us today. When I think about the ocean, for me, my happy and safe place is on the sand. I love the ocean. It is my place of refuge, but it's looking at it. Having my feet firmly embedded on the shoreline with my toes in the sand, looking out at the horizon. It's the peace, the tranquility, the way that all of my senses are bombarded with information. You can taste it. Often you can either taste the air or you can taste the water if you're swimming. You can smell it, you can hear it, you can feel it, you can see it. It's this incredible encampment of sensation. When I look out at the sea, I'm met with an idea of wildness, depending on how big the waves are, but a notion of untamability, of unmanageability, this uncontrollable, unpredictable element. And I think that does sometimes conjure up, unless you're a complete adrenaline junkie, it does conjure up a sense of unsafety, both from perhaps that notion that we can get out of our depth, but also that controlling of the ocean is completely outside of our human capability. The height, the strength, the movement and unpredictability of the water. It's unknown, uncharted even today, often unseen, outside of our human comprehension. When I look at the ocean, there's movement, there's colour, fluidity, pattern, texture. There's a vibrancy, a potency. The oceans and seas are providers of life. They nurture life. They provide life for us. They provide food. They provide a way of earning money. They provide income. There's often a cultural element to them. There's a cultural connection to the ocean or to the water for many of us and for groups of people. There's a way that the ocean shapes and frames our collective lives. And I could go on, right? We could talk about what they mean all day long. And you're going to have your own thoughts and your own pictures. So with all of that in mind, really where we're going very quickly today is kind of the beginning and the end of the Bible. So we're going to the notion of how the waters were created in creation. We're going to really quickly then touch on where they're referenced in Revelation. But where I want to concentrate is kind of that middle of what oceans represent. So the creation story tells us about how God brought order through creating separation between heaven, the sky, and the earth, and that the waters were dark and chaotic, requiring the establishment of boundaries so that they didn't run away. The division, the boundary between land, sky, and the waters. And the imagery described in Genesis is that of the land as being safe, dry, and known, a space where life can flourish, but which did require separation from the chaos of the waters. And even before that separation in Genesis 1 verse 2, we read about that in the formless and empty darkness, the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the water. So right at the front, we're getting this idea that even in the void, even in the darkness, even in the unknown, even in the chaos, the Spirit of God was hovering over the water. We're being presented with the idea of God being present, and we're being presented with the idea that there did need to be separation from the chaos and the danger of the waters of the deep, but that God was present. And from then on, in the Bible, we have repetitive and consistent imagery about the notion of chaos and danger being associated with the sea. The Bible uses some of the imagery that I just described, but there's a particular repetition around darkness, death, monsters, and we would interpret that to be dragons, chaos, threat, void, unexplainability. There's this constant repetition of these themes of chaos and darkness when the ocean or the sea is represented in the Bible, particularly in the Old Testament. In the ancient world, the sea symbolised chaos, danger and evil, a force that only God could tame. And the sea becomes a symbol of what threatens to undo life and order. The sea was often described as this insurmountable obstacle for the movement of God's people to safety, or for the threat of being swallowed whole. And I think what would spring to mind is a number of Bible stories, right, that describe those things. I can't help but start to draw parallels to what I'm reading and seeing in that repetition about darkness and chaos. I can't help but draw a parallel to my life and the deep, dark places in my own soul that I have either consciously or subconsciously drawn up boundaries between what is safe and touchable, controllable, and what is out of bounds for my conscious control and safety. We do that, don't we? Well, I do that. Some of it's really conscious, some of it's not conscious. Some of it is a choice and some of it's not a choice, about places that we can't go, don't want to go, or aren't safe to go, either in our memories, our experiences, our stories, or the deep, deep embedded stuff that sits at the centre of who we are. There is so much about this life and this spiritual journey that can feel really unsafe, chaotic, uncertain, and uncharted. And I feel like the biblical picture of the sea may be representative of that which feels out of our control, chaotic, dangerous, and sinister in our own lives. We know that dragons were used in old maps to symbolise areas on the map that were uncharted or dangerous. So there'd often be a picture of a deep sea monster that represented fear of the unknown in the trying to make sense of the world as it was put on paper, right? And those mythical creatures were often used as artistic devices to denote regions where there wasn't much known about, or where we knew or thought that sea monsters might lurk, or that signified known or unknown hazards. The map of my stories has lots of dragons on it, or areas that I either knowingly or unknowingly don't want to engage. They may represent for me past traumas, past wounds, past pain. They may represent lies that I've been sold about myself. They may represent some of my mental health challenges that I find really difficult. Sometimes all of that feels really insurmountable and unpassable. They may represent areas of grief and conflict, and the list would go on. But I know that my map has many dragons on it. For my life, as well as for how the Bible uses seas, there is this constant reminder that God's Spirit and presence is hovering above the waters. That part of us, the part of us that feels safe, the part of us that feels unsafe, unknown, and uncertain, God's Spirit is hovering. The imagery of the sea being chaotic, dangerous, and threatening, God's Spirit and presence is hovering. Oceans as a symbolic landscape require us to engage in our spiritual minds in a leap of faith and in our physical lives a leap of faith. Similar to what Lauren explored a couple of weeks ago about the wilderness table and the faith that is required to come to that wilderness table, is the idea that the danger and unsafety of the sea can be met and countered by the presence of God. And what I think of when I think of that is in the boat presence, right? So you might be familiar with Mark 4, and across the Gospels is the story of Jesus being with his disciples and wanting to cross a lake, the Sea of Galilee. I can't remember what the lake is called, but a body of water. Let's not let, reality cloud the use of metaphor here. Let's just call it a sea. And so the idea is that he says to his disciples, let's go across to the other side. They took him in the boat as he was. And other boats came along and a huge storm came up. Waves poured into the boat, threatening to sink it. Jesus was in the storm, sound asleep, with his head on a pillow. His disciples, distressed, roused him, saying, "Teacher, is it nothing to you that we're going to drown?" Awake now, he was up. He said to the wind to pipe down and to the sea, "Quiet, settle down." The wind ran out of breath. The sea became smooth as glass. Jesus reprimanded the disciples. "Why are you such cowards? Don't you have any faith at all?" And they were in absolute awe and staggered. "Who is this," they said, "that the wind and sea are at his beck and call?" What I imagine when I picture that parable story is not about the reduction of risk in Jesus calming the storm and then that being the solution, but that even through the danger, the Spirit of God was present and is present and tells us to not be afraid. That doesn't mean that there isn't something to be afraid of. The risk isn't the issue, it's the presence of God in and about the circumstances that we're in. In the Old Testament, there are countless stories about the order that God created over the darkness and of the waters. And there are so many that we could explore in great detail, but the common thread in a lot of them is about the passing through the waters in safety and on dry land. And, there's multiple references of God parting bodies of water for people to go through. And I think what we see repeated time and time again, and then in the New Testament, is this idea of a salvation template that is about crossing through something to that which God has prepared for us. And I think the beautiful link there really is the act and the sacrament of baptism. We see the symbolism from the Old Testament with the imagery of waters, darkness, and monsters, and then God's sovereignty over them. And in the New Testament, what we are presented with and gifted with today is the spiritual victory and the power of Jesus by conquering death. And the symbolism of water in all of that is so very profound. The offer of spiritual order, the taming of chaos of our spirits by us coming through the darkness of the waters into the light and life offered through Jesus. This is a representation of renewal and identification with Christ. Coming through the waters is not something we get to do or even can do in our human selves because we wouldn't survive. But through the act of baptism, we are brought through the waters as rescue, as return, as salvation. And where I really wanted to flag, this is part of the movie trailer, is in Revelation, the beauty of this is wrapped up with the idea that in the new heaven and the new earth, there is no sea. Isn't that beautiful? This idea that the reconciliation requires no separation and the order has come, right? How precious is that? So go and look at that. But I want to bring us home. And really, for me, how I see this all coming together is the sense that God is firmly in the middle of our lives, and the ocean is a metaphor of the middle, I guess. He is at the centre of us, right? The centre. But also the middle of the stories. And yes, there is power in the celebration and the hope of a beginning. And we often, as Christians, I think we often celebrate stories where we hear people starting new things, being sent into new spaces or discovering new things, and there's hope and celebration in that. And then we spend a lot of time celebrating the victory and the triumph of an end, right? And they're fantastic, fabulous, needed parts of the story. But for me, if God is not in the middle, then I am actually not terribly interested. And I think maybe it's different for all of us, but so much of my life is still in the middle of spaces. There is so much middle where there isn't resolution, where there might not be resolution, where we don't know where it's going, where it's chaotic and dangerous and unsafe. And if God doesn't dwell there, that's not something that I am particularly interested in exploring. And so I see the symbolism of the oceans and the chaos and the darkness and the danger as being an invitation for me to see God's presence and victory in the middle. And the victory isn't a resolution, it's his presence in us. I feel like a lot of my stories, I know that a lot of them won't get a victorious end in this life. There's so much middle. There might not be triumph. There might not be a lot to hope for. The middle of my story can feel really bleak, both physically, spiritually, and emotionally. It can feel consuming, and it often feels like I am constantly out of my depth. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of hope for recovery. And I am pretty sure that that is not something that's unfamiliar to a number of you. And yet, there's an and yet. What we're offered in the middle is the presence of God who hovers over the waters. He offers a way through. He offers a way of rescue, an unaloneness, a being held within the darkness and complexity, a way of conquering death ultimately, but also conquering the places and spaces of death and darkness that exist and consume us. He offers a hope and a knowing that we are not separate from God and that the table is for us, even in the dark, even in the wilderness. Of course, I want resolution. Of course I do. I'm sure you do too, for the things that feel hard and too consuming, for too painful or not enough. I think that's right. I think it's sacred. But I think what we can learn from the chaos and danger presented through oceans in the Bible is that where there isn't resolution yet, there is still Jesus. There is still presence and comfort, and there is coming. That which is coming, new heaven, new earth, no longer any sea. There is sovereignty over disorder. There is transformation through trials. That with faith as an anchor, we can trust in the divine guidance and presence of God amidst the turmoil. So deep, so wide, so strong is the love of God. So I'm going to pray, and my encouragement to you today is to think about where in your spaces and places of your soul do you need to trust that God's presence is there, and where can God's presence and God's hovering over the waters be more than just an idea for you. Precious, precious Father, I have such a strong visual image in my mind of your presence and spirit hovering over the waters. And there are spaces and times where I feel that so keenly in my life, and there are spaces and times where you feel so very, very far away. But the feeling doesn't make the reality, and we know that it's true. And so today we get to remind each other of that. when we pick up our Bibles, when we're with each other, may we be reminded that as your Spirit hovered over the waters at the creation time, your Spirit is present when there is no need for waters, when there's no need for separation, because it's complete. And until then, we lean strongly into your embrace, strongly into the fact that through the storm, you are with us. Through the darkness, you are beside us. In fact, you are holding us. And we commit all of these things to your precious and holy name. Amen.
Thank you so much for joining us. Each week at West City, we say a benediction together. We do this because we believe that the purpose of the church is to be a caring community for the world, and that as we go and serve others, we enter into Christ's work of welcome, restoration and healing, both for us and others. We believe that in doing so, we get to see and encounter Christ. So let's say the benediction together. We come together as the church to be reminded of the go of Christ. So we will go out and feed the hungry, go out and clothe the naked, go out and fight for justice, go out and end oppression, go out and proclaim anew the old story, go out and associate with those who don't look like us, think like us, act like us, and don't even like us. And we'll do it all in the name of the one who sent us. His name is Jesus.